What if I told you that the difference between a wasted life and a fulfilled one can be measured not in years, but in minutes? Minutes of discipline, minutes of choice, minutes that either build your future or silently destroy it. Have you ever wondered why some people, starting from nothing, rise to incredible heights, while others, talented, intelligent, full of potential, never leave the shadows? The answer hides in two forces we all hold in our hands: discipline and time. Imagine a young man named Daniel. At 23, he stands at a crossroads that feels familiar to many of us. He wakes up late, scrolling endlessly through his phone, convinced that tomorrow he will finally begin working on his dream. But tomorrow never comes. Days pass, weeks vanish, the dream fades, while life, relentless, continues to move forward. One evening, exhausted by his own excuses, Daniel sits in silence. He remembers his grandfather's words: "Discipline is the bridge between desire and reality. Time is the river that never stops flowing. Together, they decide the story of your life." That night, Daniel makes a choice, a small one. He sets his alarm for 6 a.m., not to conquer the world in a day, but to take one simple step. What he doesn't know is that this single decision will transform his entire existence, teaching him lessons not only about success, but also about the hidden laws that govern YouTube, careers, and life itself. The alarm rang at 6 a.m. sharp. Daniel's hand reached instinctively for the phone, his mind whispering the same old excuse: just 5 more minutes. But this time, something inside resisted. He sat on the edge of the bed, his body heavy, his eyelids begging for rest. The world outside was still dark. The air carried the silence of a city not yet awake. This was his first real fight, not against an enemy, but against himself. He stumbled to the kitchen, poured a glass of cold water, and sat at the table. For the first time, he was fully awake, not because of caffeine, but because of choice. In that quiet hour, he opened a notebook. On the first page, he wrote 3 words: discipline over comfort. The words looked fragile, almost meaningless, yet they marked the beginning of a new identity. Still, doubt crept in. His mind argued, "What difference does one morning make? You're still broke. You still have no audience. You still have no idea where to start." But then he remembered time never stops. Every wasted morning was a stone added to the wall separating him from his dreams. Every disciplined morning was a stone placed to build the bridge toward them. That day, Daniel didn't change the world. He didn't earn money. He didn't even feel like a winner. But he had won something far greater: his first victory over himself. And what he didn't yet realize was that this tiny victory would multiply. Like a seed planted in fertile soil, it would grow roots deep into his future. The second morning was harder than the first. The excitement of a new beginning had already faded. The alarm cut through the silence like a cruel reminder. Daniel pressed stop and sat still for a moment. His mind whispered, "Why torture yourself? One day doesn't matter. Sleep a little more." But then he looked at the notebook lying on the table. The words, "discipline over comfort," staring back at him like a challenge. He dragged himself up, slower than before, but still, he rose. As days passed, discipline began to feel heavy. The early mornings offered no applause, no reward. He was still alone at the table, still writing notes no one else would read. The temptation to quit grew stronger. Friends called him to go out late at night. The bed seemed warmer. The excuses felt louder. Every day was a negotiation between his old self and the man he wanted to become. On the 10th day, he failed. The alarm rang, but this time he stayed in bed. He told himself he deserved rest. Hours later, he woke up with guilt crushing his chest. Failure hurt, but it also taught. Daniel realized that discipline is not about perfection. It's about returning after you fail. That evening, instead of drowning in shame, he sat with his notebook and wrote, "Discipline is not a straight line. It's a battle I must fight every day." For the first time, he understood that success is not built on the days you feel strong, but on the days you feel weak and choose to rise anyway. Weeks passed. Daniel had managed to win more mornings than he lost. He was proud, yet strangely unsatisfied. He woke early, filled notebooks with scattered ideas, but progress seemed invisible. It was like rowing endlessly without knowing where the shore was. One night, sitting under the dim glow of his desk lamp, he asked himself, "Am I disciplined, or am I just busy?" The question struck hard. He realized he was fighting the same mistake so many creators and dreamers fall into, confusing activity with progress. He remembered a story from a fellow content creator. A young man had uploaded dozens of videos on YouTube. Random vlogs, chaotic topics, no strategy. He worked tirelessly, but his channel never grew. Why? Because discipline without direction is like pouring water into a broken glass. Daniel finally saw the truth. Discipline must be guided by clarity of purpose. Without clarity, even the most consistent effort fades into nothing. That evening, he wrote a new line in his notebook. "Discipline is the engine. Direction is the map." Daniel began to see that his greatest enemy was not laziness anymore. It was scattering his energy. He wanted to try everything at once, learning photography, writing, starting a YouTube channel, even building a small business. Each idea pulled him in a different direction. The result? He moved a little in every way, but nowhere in particular. One evening, overwhelmed by endless notes and unfinished plans, he remembered a quote his grandfather used to repeat: "The man who chases two rabbits catches none." It was then he realized, if discipline is the engine and direction is the map, then focus is the destination. Daniel decided to choose. He asked himself, where can I grow, not for a week, not for a month, but for years? After long reflection, he picked his path. Not the easiest, not the fastest, but the one that aligned with his passion and had the power to last, creating meaningful content that could inspire others. The first weeks on his chosen path were filled with fire. Daniel woke early, worked with focus, and poured his heart into every creation. He expected results to follow quickly, but the numbers told another story. Views, almost none. Feedback, silence. Progress, invisible. Every evening, staring at the screen, he felt the same frustration echoing inside. Why am I giving so much and receiving nothing back? This was the moment most people break. Not because they lack talent, but because they misjudged the timeline of success. Daniel remembered the myths he had once believed. If it doesn't work in a month, it never will. Successful people are just lucky or cheating the system. The algorithm decides everything, not discipline. But slowly, through research and reflection, he learned the truth. YouTube, like life, works in cycles. The algorithm tests, redistributes, pulls back, and pushes forward. Progress isn't a straight climb. It's waves. He wrote in his notebook, "The silence is not failure. It's the test before growth." Daniel realized that staring at numbers wasn't enough. The silence, the lack of results, these were not punishments, but messages waiting to be decoded. He began studying not only his own work, but also the patterns of those who had succeeded. He noticed details he had once ignored. The way titles triggered curiosity, the colors in thumbnails, the rhythm of storytelling. Failure stopped being a wall. It became a mirror. Every weak performance whispered, "Here is where you lost attention. Here is what confused your audience. Here is what you must fix." He understood that data is the voice of the audience. It doesn't flatter, it doesn't lie, it simply reflects reality. Daniel's discipline evolved. It was no longer just about waking early or working long hours. It was about working smart, testing, adjusting, learning. One night, as he compared his latest attempt with a competitor's, he felt the sting of humility. Their work was sharper, more engaging. For a moment, jealousy burned inside. But then he smiled bitterly and admitted, "They are not my enemy. They are my teachers." It happened on a quiet morning when Daniel wasn't expecting anything. He uploaded another video, like so many before, without hope, almost out of habit. But when he checked the numbers a few hours later, something unusual appeared. Views climbing steadily. Comments, real comments from strangers beginning to appear. It wasn't viral, it wasn't massive, but for Daniel, it was a break in the silence. One comment struck him deeply. "This video felt different. Thank you, I needed this today." It wasn't about numbers anymore. It was about impact. Someone, somewhere had been moved by his work. Daniel realized that progress doesn't always announce itself with fireworks. Sometimes it comes as a flicker of light, a single spark that says, "You're on the right path." The small spark of progress gave Daniel energy, but also revealed a hidden truth. One win is not enough. If he wanted lasting results, he needed to scale his discipline, transform it from a personal habit into a structured system. So he built a routine. Mornings were no longer just about waking early. They became sacred blocks of time. Research, writing, editing, publishing. Each hour carried a purpose. But with growth came new challenges. The pressure of consistency weighed heavy. The audience now expected more. A missed upload wasn't just personal failure anymore. It was breaking a silent promise to those who believed in him. And yet, Daniel discovered something powerful when anchored in responsibility. Knowing others waited for his work turned effort into duty. And duty, unlike motivation, did not vanish when he felt tired. Months of sacrifice had carved Daniel into someone unrecognizable. The man who once hit snooze without thought was gone. In his place stood someone sharper, stronger, forged by the rhythm of discipline and the patience of time. But growth came with a brutal cost. Friends drifted away. Opportunities outside his chosen path vanished. Loneliness pressed hard against his spirit. One night, as he stared at the screen, numbers rising steadily at last, Daniel asked the question that haunted every disciplined soul. What is the price of success, and am I willing to pay it? Tears welled in his eyes. He thought of mornings lost to fatigue, evenings filled with doubt, the birthdays and gatherings missed, the weight of constant pressure. Yet he also thought of the man he had become, a man who no longer waited for life to hand him meaning, but built it brick by brick. The climax wasn't about views or money or applause. It was about identity. As dawn broke, Daniel stood by the window. The city stretched before him, silent, vast, alive. For the first time, he didn't measure his life in failures or successes, in numbers or applause. He measured it in moments of choice. Every early morning he had conquered. Every night of doubt he had endured. Every small victory he had protected. All of them had added up, not to perfection, but to transformation. He realized that discipline and time are not enemies. They are the two greatest allies a person can ever have. Discipline gives direction. Time multiplies results. Together, they rewrite destiny. Daniel closed his notebook for the last time. On its final page, he wrote, "Discipline turns minutes into milestones. Time turns milestones into a life worth living." The lesson was clear, and it echoed beyond his story to anyone listening. You don't need luck. You need to win today. Win one morning. Win one choice. Win one step forward when your body screams to stop. Because the river of time never halts, and discipline is the only bridge that carries you across. And as long as you keep walking, success is no longer a question of if. It becomes a matter of when.